Ever pondered over why the Black Plague was christened so? Or how it managed to wipe out nearly 60% of Europe's population in the 14th century? As we delve into the past, we uncover the enigma that is the Black Plague. Our story begins in the arid plains of Central Asia, a place far removed from the bustling cities and towns of Europe. Here, the Black Plague was birthed, a silent, deadly spectre ready to claim countless lives. But how did this unseen enemy travel thousands of miles to reach Europe's doorstep? The answer lies in an ancient trade network, the Silk Road. The Silk Road, stretching from the heart of Asia to the edge of Europe, was a bustling highway of commerce and culture. But it also became an unwitting conveyor of death. The Black Plague hitched a ride with traders concealed within their goods and journeyed towards the west. Its first major stop, the region of Crimea. And what about the name, the Black Plague? This terrifying epidemic wasn't always known by this ominous moniker. The name was inspired by the dark blackish patches that appeared on the skin of those afflicted. These were no ordinary blemishes. They were a sign of internal bleeding, a telltale symptom of the disease that was ravaging the body from within. As the disease spread, these black patches became a grim hallmark, a symbol of impending doom. The Black Plague was more than just a name. It was a visual testament to the terrifying power of this disease, a cruel brand marking those destined for death. The Black Plague, a name that still sends shivers down our spines, was just beginning its deadly journey. As we continue to unravel the mysteries of this historic catastrophe, we will discover the breadth of its reach, the depth of its impact, and the desperate measures taken to combat it. Stay with us as we journey further into the heart of the Black Enigma, a disease so deadly its symptoms were as horrifying as the death it brought. Can you imagine living through such terror? Welcome to the second chapter of our journey into the terror of the Black Plague, where we delve into the gruesome symptoms of this silent killer. The Black Plague, also known as the bubonic plague, carried a signature mark, the notorious buboes. These were painful swellings in the lymph nodes, most often found in the groin, armpit, or neck. They were alarmingly large, often the size of a common apple or an egg. The skin covering these buboes turned a ghastly dark purple or black, lending the disease its terrifying moniker, the Black Plague. Symptoms didn't stop at these buboes, oh no. The disease had more in store. A high fever, often between 101 and 105 degrees Fahrenheit, would consume the victim. This fever was accompanied by chilling episodes, leaving the person in a state of constant discomfort. The sickness would then progress into a state of delirium, where the victim would experience severe confusion, disorientation, and often hallucinations. This terrifying array of symptoms did not just afflict the body, it also had profound psychological effects, contributing to the mass hysteria that swept through communities. The mere sight of these symptoms in a neighbor, a friend, or a family member was enough to incite fear and panic. The disease was not just a physical ailment, it was a psychological tormentor, a silent killer that struck terror in the hearts of those living through the era. Remember, this was a time when medical science was in its infancy. The correlation between symptoms and disease progression was not well understood. The sudden onset of these gruesome symptoms, followed by rapid deterioration and often death, was incomprehensible and horrifying. As the symptoms worsened, so did the fear and confusion. The plague was yet to unleash its full fury. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the chilling tale of the Black Plague in our next scene. When faced with death, what lengths would you go to for survival? The 14th century Europe had no dearth of desperate measures. In the throes of the devastating Black Plague, the people of medieval Europe turned to a myriad of treatments, most of which were as bizarre as they were ineffective. The lack of medical knowledge in that era gave rise to some truly desperate measures. One such treatment was bloodletting. This ancient practice involved releasing blood from a patient in the belief that it would balance the body's humors and restore health. However, it often weakened the patient further and did little to alleviate the symptoms of the plague. Another desperate measure was the use of plague doctors. These were not trained physicians, but rather individuals appointed by cities and towns to treat the afflicted. They were recognized by their peculiar costumes, which included a long beak-like mask filled with aromatic herbs and spices. It was thought that these would purify the bad air believed to cause the disease. However, their treatments often ranged from ineffective to downright harmful. The Black Plague also had profound social and religious implications. Many saw the disease as a divine punishment, leading to widespread penance and prayer. Some even formed processions, flagellating themselves in public to atone for humanity's sins. Yet these measures did nothing to halt the spread of the plague. In some areas, paranoia and fear led to the persecution of those believed to be spreading the disease. This included foreigners, beggars, lepers, and even cats. Such scapegoating resulted in countless innocent lives lost without curbing the disease's progression. Despite the ineffectiveness of these measures, they highlight the desperation of a society trying to combat an invisible enemy. The people of 14th century Europe were grappling with a force they didn't understand, and in their fear and confusion they clung to any hope they could find. In a world grappling with the unknown, these desperate measures were the only hope against the relentless Black Plague. Can a single disease change the course of history? The Black Plague did, and how? The Black Plague, also known as the bubonic plague, was not confined to a single city, country, or continent. It was a malevolent spectre that swept across the globe, leaving devastation in its wake. Beginning in Asia, it traversed along the Silk Road, hitching a ride on the black rats, infesting the merchant ships. It reached the shores of Europe around the mid-14th century, and within 5 years, it had spread its deadly tendrils throughout the continent. This was not a regional crisis. The Black Plague was a global pandemic, a term we've become all too familiar with in recent years. The world was its oyster, and it feasted without restraint. Its voracious appetite for life was insatiable, and the death toll was staggering. In Europe alone, it's estimated that between 1/3 and 1/2 of the population fell victim to this merciless killer. That's roughly 25 million lives extinguished in a blink of history's eye. But the Black Plague didn't stop at mere mortality. It was a socio-economic disruptor, a force that toppled the very structures of medieval society. With such a drastic reduction in population, labor became scarce, and the survivors found themselves in a position of newfound bargaining power. This led to an upheaval in the socio-economic order, giving rise to the modern wage system and the end of serfdom in many parts of Europe. The disease also had profound effects on the religious beliefs of the time. Many saw the plague as divine punishment, leading to widespread persecution of those deemed responsible, from Jews and beggars to lepers and foreigners. The world, it seemed, was forever changed. The Black Plague, a global pandemic, left in its wake a world forever changed. Every storm eventually passes, but the scars it leaves behind remain. What was the aftermath of this deadly storm called the Black Plague? In the wake of the Black Plague, the world was left drastically transformed. The plague's relentless grip had led to a horrendous loss of life. An estimated 75 to 200 million people vanished from the face of the earth, leaving societies in disarray. This massive decline in population had profound effects on economies, with labor shortages causing a dramatic rise in wages and a shift in the balance of power. The Black Plague was not just a physical disease, but a spiritual one as well. People's faith was severely tested, leading to a loss of trust in the church, which had been powerless to prevent the disaster. This crisis of faith ushered in a new era of religious questioning and reform. In the cultural sphere, the Black Plague served as a stark reminder of mortality, influencing artists and writers for generations to come. The grim reality of death became a common theme in literature and the visual arts, giving birth to a genre known as memento mori, a Latin phrase meaning "remember you must die." But amidst the devastation, the Black Plague also spurred significant advancements. It became painfully clear that understanding and preventing disease was a matter of life and death. This realization marked the beginning of a new focus on public health and medicine. The foundations of epidemiology were laid as people began to recognize the importance of sanitation and isolation in controlling the spread of disease. And so, the Black Plague, while a horrific tragedy, also served as a catalyst for change. It shook societies to their core, forced a re-evaluation of long-held beliefs, and ignited a renewed emphasis on health and science. The Black Plague, a catastrophe of epic proportions, became a catalyst for change, shaping the world as we know it today.